Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to another Faster Masters Rowing Radio. It is lockdown week 8. I'm Rebecca Caroe, and I'm here, as always, with Marlene Royle.
And hello, everybody. We're glad to be here again.
It's interesting how the rhythm has changed, hasn't it, somewhat, of going into a weekly podcast from a monthly one?
Yeah, we're getting used to each other, I think. I think we're getting some new followers too. I have a sense that, oh yeah, I caught you on Monday, that sounded good, or Tuesday, depending which continent you're on.
Oh, that's really
We
cool.
like that. We want more listeners.
We do.
Yes, more listeners, more questions.
Let's kick off just with a brief message from our sponsors, without whom it would not be possible to do this show. For the first time this week, we have a new book to promote. If you are looking for ways to improve your rowing, Blake Gourlay's new book, The Movement of Rowing, explains how movement limitations in your foot and your ankle affect a rower's performance, technique, and health. The book is loaded with self-screening strategies and solutions to help rowers reach their full potential. You can get the ebook and have 30% off with using the promo code RowingChat. Follow the link on the sponsors page at rowing.chat/sponsors. Blake is a podcaster with the RowingChat Network. His show is called The Strength Coach Roundtable, and you may want to listen to his most recent episode. If you want a print book, it's on Amazon. Sadly, I'm afraid the discount coupon doesn't apply. We're also still doing our audience survey. Please fill it in. Go to rowing.chat on the homepage. The link's at the bottom of the homepage. And William Mahoney, shirts for athletic men. We are getting some orders through. So thank you very much to everybody who has ordered, because a small portion of your order value goes to supporting the whole of the RowingChat Network. These are dress shirts that are designed to fit an athletic rowing body, and you can get a 10% discount using the coupon RowingChat10. You can follow the link from the show notes or at rowing.chat/sponsors. And finally, just a tiny little announcement with regards to the whole RowingChat Network. We're delighted that we have been ranked in the top 10 rowing podcasts on the web. This has been done by the people behind FeedSpot. And if you go to blog.feedspot.com/rowing_podcasts, you'll see us at the top of the list, which kind of makes me feel really super proud. Hey, Marlene, so Faster Masters, we are carrying on regardless. And we heard yesterday here in New Zealand that as of Thursday, we dropped down to level 2. And that means meetings of 10 people are allowed.
Great. Yes, no, things are changing little by little in different places. I know here in Canada, the conversation is opening up a lot about how to approach opening up rowing programs and clubs as the provinces change their levels and recommendations. And actually, Rowing Canada actually has a webinar tomorrow evening exactly about that for members of different clubs or coaches, about ideas and guidelines how to start opening up club programs and what needs to be done in terms of sanitation and considerations and scheduling. So things are starting to move, and I would expect a lot of people are going to be sculling this summer. That's what I think, and that'll be great for those of us who love sculling. And singles are perfect for social distancing, and you can coach. I mean, that's a nice thing about singles, is that there's no problem coaching, whereas I suspect I may not be in my double all summer this year, but it depends on the restrictions and what happens. But yes, things are moving and a lot of discussions are going on, and I think we will see people getting in singles. And for those who are sweep rowers, this is a great way to improve your skill And even if you are not racing this year, depending on where you live, improving your skills in the single would be a really, really good focus for the next 3 or 4 months, because that's going to benefit you in any boat that you row in. So
it certainly is. And remember that all the national federations are providing excellent guidance to you. So look for your local federation. I know that there's been discussion about US rowing and British rowing, and I certainly know that New Zealand rowing here has been giving some great advice. A quick reminder, if you're watching live, hello to everybody who's watching live. If you have any questions, just type them in below the live stream and we will bring them up and endeavour to answer them as best we can. Our first question came as a result of a discussion thread that I saw, which was from a lady called Gill Shaw, and she says, it would be great to get some advice for people who have had COVID-19. I am slowly getting over it, but it comes and goes, and any high heart rate work can bring back nasty symptoms. My concern is that people could return to sport too soon and cause themselves damage, and currently there seems to be little in the way of advice on this. So Marlene, have you seen this at all?
Yes, it definitely has come up, and I've talked with some athletes already who are recovering from COVID-19. I think the first thing you have to look at is, one, how severely you were affected by it, for how long you were affected by it, what is your age, all those factors. When you're looking at returning back to training, whether it's from an illness or whether it's from an injury, I think one of the initial rules is you have to look at how much time off have you had. If you've been off for 8 weeks, let's say, plan at least 8 weeks, if not 12 weeks, to try to work your way back in. So there's going to have to be a gradual schedule to work yourself back in. Now, with COVID-19, obviously, it's different than other types of injuries per se. The thing that is quite concerning with COVID-19 is because it causes a lot of inflammation. So it can affect a number of organs, your lungs. It can affect your heart muscle. There's something called myocarditis, which can occur from the virus, which is basically, in very simple terms, it's an inflammation of the heart muscle. And this could be quite concerning, especially for older athletes. So the first thing you want to do, obviously, is talk to your doctor. I suppose if you've been being treated for COVID-19 or recovering from it, you're in contact with your doctor. But it's really important that you make sure that you have normal cardiac function before you start getting back into an exercise program. And your exercise program really should, if you had a severe case of COVID-19, should be in combination with your doctor and a cardiologist. They need to look at your ECG or your EKG and make sure that you've got normal signals in your heart and that your heart is working correctly. It's going to have to perhaps be very gradual, and that may mean just very, very low heart rate training, low level, easy, comfortable training. We may be looking at walking for a while. Walking, easy rowing. I wouldn't think of anything stressful like an interval type workout until you're really at a level where say you could row or train. I mean, I'm just tossing this out here. This is what I use often as a guideline with athletes. It's like I'd be really comfortable training for at least a good 60, 70 minutes session at a low intensity before you start adding in any other thing. So it might take you quite a while to work up to that, depending on, what your baseline is now.
That's really excellent advice. And I will read out something that Will Ruth, who is also a podcast host on the Rowing Chat Network, wrote in the same thread. Evidence is limited and conclusive recommendations regarding these issues will require ongoing research and monitoring of athletes who have been affected with COVID-19. However, we take this opportunity to provide some initial guidance for the cardiac evaluation of athletes with prior COVID-19 infection. And that's a quote from the blogs at bmj.com. So that's the British Medical Journal, and it's under a sub-thread for the British Journal of Sports Medicine, BJSM, on dated the 24th of April this year, the resurgence of sport in the wake of COVID-19 cardiac considerations in competitive athletes. So I'll share that link in the show notes. So anyone who is interested in going into the detailed advice from medical practitioners, I think that will be a good place to start. But exercise caution seems to, if I hear correctly, seems to be the best advice so far.
Well, and also your fatigue levels. I mean, I'm hearing from some people who are recovering, they feel better, but there's a very, very deep level of fatigue. And, you know, with recovering from any type of virus, or, you know, that's just something that we can't predict how long it's going to take, because first of all, everybody's different, and every type of virus is different, and this virus behaves in a lot of different ways. So I think as long as you've got clearance from your doctor, and and you can start easy. I mean, you can do things, lots of flexibility work, things like that, that can still make you feel better without increasing your heart rate. So you could look at flexibility, at mobility. Certainly, low heart rate work is always a plus, but I would say if you're going to prioritize anything, the base training is the most important. Later on, if you get to the point that you're thinking about speed, you can bring that up relatively quickly, but if you start to lose the base is what takes months and months and months to rebuild. So, biking, maybe things that are your body weight's eliminated, like on the bike, for example. Rowing in the sense is good because you're sitting down, and then just good old walking does have a place in all this. But that's all valuable, and look for things that you can do that don't raise your heart rate, that can still make you feel better. And improving your mobility is going to help improve the movements that you're doing in the boat, or walking, or biking, or swimming.
Yes, one thing that obviously most rowing-based training is designed to be continuous over a longer period of time. And so I would add one piece of advice is that you're going to need some ultra low intensity. And for that, if walking is something you can already do, a simple tool to use to transition up from a walking to a slightly greater intensity is something called Scout's Pace. Now, I learned about this when I was a Girl Guide back in the day, and Lord Baden-Powell, who started the World Scouting movement, observed runners in Africa from African tribes, and what they would do is they would run 10, walk 10, or run 20, walk 20, and that's an extremely efficient way of covering a very long distance with equal amounts of paces of running. And then as you get more familiar with it, you may choose to go unequal. So you might walk 10, run 20. And I think all of those things could be pretty useful in getting yourself to the point where you can begin to maybe do 10 minutes or 15 minutes continuous on a rowing machine, or in a boat, or on a bicycle.
And take breaks. If you get to the point that, say, you're at 10 minutes, take a break, do some stretching or some mobility work, that go back on for 10 minutes, so you can break those periods of rowing up with something, with a core exercise, with something else. But do talk to your doctor, because if there is any concern that it has affected your heart muscle, you want to have very, very clear guidelines in terms of where you need to keep your heart rate, Are there limits? And, these are just things that they have to monitor.
Absolutely. And one thing psychologically, for me personally, if I know I have a certain amount of time that I have to do as an endurance piece, personally, I never take the break at the halfway stage, because starting the second part for me is much more challenging. So say, just for the sake of argument, say it's an hour you're doing, I will always row through to 40 minutes so that the second half is only 20 minutes. So don't assume that half and half works. Experiment. What works with your brain? See, Marlene doesn't have this problem.
No, it's funny.
I'm the weirdo around here.
I don't have to trick myself. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah, it is. It's all about tricking myself. Kath McGuckin came in with a question. She says, how can I make a crew when the older masters have fixed up squads already? I think this is a really common problem. When you're new to a club, it's very difficult to break into an existing crew or a squad that's already used to training together. And I've personally experienced this, and I'm sure other people listening will have empathy with that too. So firstly, regardless of your own skill or ability relative to the others, the important thing in my view for masters rowing is to be flexible and friendly. It doesn't matter if you're a man or a woman. It doesn't matter if you're older or younger. It doesn't matter if you've been to the Olympics and they haven't, or the reverse. The whole camaraderie and good base friendliness and openness and community feeling in a master squad, in my view, should be about being willing to row with anyone. Not all the time, but once in a while. So for the explicit purposes of Kath's question, Kath, I would say the first thing you should do is let it be known that you are available to fill in for anyone who can't make a training session. Whether you do that by putting a notice on the physical notice board in your club rooms. Personally, I love putting notices behind the loo door, because everybody then sees it, because nearly everybody at some point will use that room. Or put it by the mirror in the changing room, or put it on a common, if you have a notice board or a thread in a Facebook group or whatever. Share your contact details and tell people generally when you are available. If you say, I work for myself, I'm really flexible, so long as I have 24 hours notice, I would love to help make up a crew. I can scull, I can sweep, or I row on port, I can steer, whatever it is. So make yourself super available and super friendly and useful, and just be there if the opportunity arises to row with other people. And then what you will probably find is someone else will step up with the same message. And they'll say, hey, I like to row at 10 a.m. on a Friday morning. Does anyone else have availability at that time? So I think the second thing that will happen is you'll find someone else who can be available when you're available. So make a crew with them. Even if it's once a month, if you can make it once a week, that's lovely. So try and create your own form of regularity. And if you find that that gets to maybe 3 or 4 people, you can then say, hey, for the people who would like to row at 10 a.m. on a Friday, would you guys like to try a 4 this week, or a quad? Or shall we go in 2 doubles and switch it over from last week when I was with you and you with someone else? You know, that kind of idea. So you're not being pushy, but you're making suggestions about how the group might come together to enjoy rowing together. And so rather than trying to break into a fixed up squad, which is disruptive and it can make you look a bit pushy and make people want to reject you rather than accept your advances, I think that trying to find your own little squad is a nice way to start. And those 2 options may be open to you. Now, there is a third way, and for this, I think it's worthwhile having a conversation with the committee or whoever is the organizer manager of your group. You may self-organize, a lot of masters groups do, or you may have a coach or a captain, and to ask them whether there might be an opportunity during each week where everybody can come together and no fixed crews are pre-organized. Now, I recommend this because this is what my club does every Saturday morning, and it's a technique that's useful for a couple of things. One, you arrive and somebody selects crews once they see who is there in the shed. So there's a nice opportunity to stand around and have a little chat, which is social and nice. Secondly, it's really good for bringing on newcomers and beginners and helping them to transition into rowing with other people who are more experienced than them, which is a great coaching lead. And thirdly, it builds community by ensuring that people get to know other people by sitting in the same crews as them. And so we particularly notice, and I often quietly take note when we go out for a coffee after our outing on a Saturday, who sits with whom? Are there little cliques who are forming who always want to sit next to each other and also row together? Or are people beginning to form friendly relationships and sit next to different people in the group? And I believe very firmly that for the well-being, the community health of a rowing group, it's nice to ensure that people will all do this. Now, there will be people who will absent themselves from a session like that. And I think you just have to let it go until it becomes commonplace or the normal behavior around here. You can't force people to row like that in a sort of communal, we call it a jamming session, like, musicians jamming together. You can't force it. But I do believe that the more people do it more often, the more it becomes the norm and the less people question it. And so the more the outlier then gets ostracized. And so for my club, it is the norm on a Saturday morning, with one exception, which is when we're training for a regatta and people want that practice to train in a preset crew. And I just give that out there to anybody. If you'd like to try it, do feel free to message me if you've got better suggestions for Kath. But I hope that works for you. Now, we've got a last question from Karin Fecteau, and she asks, how can I determine the ideal setup for my foot stretcher? Like, what's the ideal alignment of the pin with regards to the knees at the catch? And how can I find out the collar placement or the ideal inboard and outboard for both my single scull and a quad? So start with the beginning.
Okay.
What's the ideal setup for the foot stretcher with respect to the pin, Marlene?
Okay, well, first of all, when you set your foot stretchers, you have to take two things into consideration. And this is, we're looking at this at a very, very basic level here, because we're not looking at details of your foot stretcher, which could be your heel height, the angle of your foot stretchers, but just in terms of like fore and aft setting, you have to work between the parentheses, I call them. So your foot stretchers need to be set like when you're placing the blade in the water. The reference point that you want is that the center line of your hips is at least equal level with the pin of the oarlock, if not even a little bit to the stern of the pin of your oarlock. That's a very important reference point. So you have to move your feet and then sit. Where are you when you put the blade in the water? And you have to know how far you're moving up the slide in order to judge that. So you want to make sure at least the hip is up to the level of the pin, if not more, a little bit more to the stern, because that is a very efficient angle of the oar to place the blade in the water. So that's one reference. At the other end, when our legs are down and you're sitting in the position where you're about to tap the oar out of the water, you also have to be comfortable at this point. So at this point, you want to have about, if you're in a sculling boat, you want to have about one hand width between the tips of your handles. So your handles are in front of you, your legs are down, you're sitting, sitting comfortably on the seat, not too far back that you feel your wheels start to slip, but sitting comfortably. And then with your hands in front of you, make sure that you have a hand width between your handles. So these 2 points have to agree. I would say if you're in your single, look at the first point where your hips are. The next point is that's where you're going to make some inboard adjustments. If you don't have enough room or you have too much room, that could be a potential reason to adjust your inboard. It's not the only reason to adjust your inboard. And Rebecca, the next was, how do we determine our inboard and outboard? Was that Karen's
That's correct,
Okay.
yes.
There are many factors here, and rigging is something, if you think about cycling, people pay $400, $500, $600 for somebody to rig a bike for them and set the bike up for them. And actually, our rowing shells and singles are much more complicated in some degree when you look at all the complexity of the angles and the forces and the biomechanics and you being comfortable. So there isn't a cookbook number for inboard and outboard, because there's a range, and the range is going to depend, first of all, on what type of oars you have, what type of blade do you row with, because different blade designs have different lengths. So the outboard, it's going to depend quite a bit on the type of blade shape that you have and what range is available to you. Your inboard measurements are going to relate to your overall span, which is the distance of one pin on one side to the pin on the other side. So in a single, for example, a very standard starting point is 160 centimeters. Your inboard has to, which is the distance from your collar to the end of the handle, your inboard has to allow for some overlap of the handles. How much overlap is a little bit individual here. Some people like a full grip. I don't. For example, I like about 3/4 of the grip overlapping. I don't like more than that. How you adjust your inboard is going to depend on whether you can sit comfortably at the release, and a little bit less inboard is also going to help you move your foot stretcher towards the stern to get you through the pin more. So you might be, if you have an oar that's 285 centimeters, you might have 86 inboard and 286 length rather, or 85 inboard and 285 length overall. That's a range. If your boat has a wider span, your inboards are going to be longer. If you're a lightweight, petite person, your pins are going to be closer together. Your inboards are going to be scaled down. So comfort is a big thing here, and also the cookbook traditional formula is 1/2 the span plus 8 centimeters. So if you're 160, it's 80 plus 8, which is 88 centimeters. Some people like that. For me, I find that to be way too much inboard for me, because your handles overlap more than just the length of the grip, and I don't like to row that with that. So if I had 160 span, I row with like 86 or 85, depending on what type of blade that I row with. When you're in a bigger boat, a little bit faster boat, you might rig it a little bit differently. So there is some subjective feel as to what is efficient for the stroke rate that, if you're racing, say the stroke rate that you want to target, and are you able to maintain a proper rhythm and a proper pressure at that load that you're rigged at. So it really, it takes some experimentation. And if you are a member of US Rowing, Jim Dietz did a really good webinar on rigging for masters, that if you have a certain level of a championship or regatta membership with US Rowing, you can watch any of these webinars on demand. But that's kind of giving you the big picture. I mean, there's a lot of moving parts, including your flexibility and mobility and your strength and who you're rowing with. And are there two different crews sharing one boat that you have to find an in-between that's going to be, say you've got a men's crew and a women's crew sharing the same boat. You have to find a span in between and oars that work. And so, so there's a lot of considerations, but, it's worth spending time on it because it's actually quite important to be rigged properly.
So a small advert, if you would like the Faster Masters team to help you with your individual rig, buy our video assessment product and we will adapt it to come take a look at you live, sitting in your boat at your club, and give you advice there and then, watch you as you make the changes and, try it over. So get in touch if that's something you'd like.
Yes, video helps a lot. If you're rigging, even if somebody's watching you, they can see certain things, but it's much better to have somebody video you so that you can look at it frame by frame and actually see where you are. Another great little trick for seeing of getting up through the pin, this is a trick I learned from Larry Gluckman, is take white athletic tape and put it in your rails. And then just go out for a row. And when you come in, you're going to see the black spot of where your wheel ends. And that is where your compression is stopping. So you have to see where that point is relative to the pin, because that's where you are. That's your functional rowing. You can sit in the boat and get yourself up there, but are you reaching that point when you're actually rowing? So that's a very, very important reference point. I would start there.
That's a good point. I'm going to add I'm a pedant, and there are some things that really bug me. One of the things that too many crews do not take a look at is where the slides are in relation to the pin, not just your physical body and your capability of where you move to. Again, the rule of thumb is that the front stop of your slides should be 2 centimeters to the stern in front of your pin. And the reason for this is because you can have tiny little lurching strokes, and you do not want to hit the front stops. And equally, you don't want them to be so far forward that they're going to grind into the back of your calves if you can avoid. But particularly at our club, there's a large number of people we have a couple of boats which have an open deck, and the slides are quite close together, and people pull the slides back because they don't like them hitting the back of their calves, and they end up with the front stops behind the pin. So there's absolutely no way that they can get into the correct catch position. And I get into the boat and, almost the first thing I check is, did someone move these slides? It drives me nuts.
Mm-hmm. Well, then you
know who you are.
Right. Well, you can't get the right angle anyway. That's, and then no one's going to have the same angles than if you're all at different front stops. So
completely right. Now, we got a notification. Let's just roll into a couple of comments from the previous item when I was talking about getting into a crew. Stephen says his club's jamming session, they call it rock up and row, which that's nice. And then we had another comment from Emily Booker with regards to the inclusive nature, which I was trying to explain about a rock up and row session. And she says, I'm not sure I like the idea of ostracizing someone just because they like doing their own thing most of the time. They may not feel comfortable mixing with random people. They may have social anxiety, and making them feel even more excluded could make it worse and cause them to leave the club, or worse, leave the sport. Live and let live. A very fair point, Emily, and you're absolutely right. Context is everything, and it is not, even in our club, obligatory to show up for that particular session. But people make their own choices, I think, is a fair answer, I suppose.
Well, and I think it relates to the overall culture in the club. That, I mean, there is an issue when there are set crews that will not let other people row with them, and if that starts to that's maybe a different factor than someone who prefers to train on their own, or just has maybe one person they like to row with, and that's okay. That I think it's a different issue than it being a culture of a club where people can't break in or have an opportunity to row with other people. So
it's a good point. Now, we got contacted this week by the lovely people from Rowers' Choice. They are doing another global erg challenge. And let's just have a quick look at, whoops, I've done the wrong thing. Here we go. Here is the challenge. You can register any time from the 1st of May, and it needs to be completed by the 22nd of May. There is a seeding round of a 1K piece, and then they have a whole load of elimination rounds. So you can either do the Henley Royal distance of 2,112 meters. You can do the Stotesbury Cup distance of 1,500 meters. You can do the boat race distance of 6,800 meters. You can do Bond and Murray's world record pair time, the most meters rowed in 6:08. Now that's quite attractive, actually.
Mm-hmm. I like that.
They're going to have a round of 750 meters, and then the USA Women's 8s world record round time of 5:54. So this is an elimination contest, but all the details are there on rowerschoice.com. So if that's something that attracts you, please feel free to go and take part.
Oh, that's good.
Now, Marlene and I were talking about what would be a fun thing to do to wrap up this episode. And we got chatting because one of my lockdown challenges has been to sort out our family photos and get them stuck into albums. And no, I haven't finished it. But I did find a lot of my old rowing photos. So we have a double header treat for you. This week, Marlene, next week, me. Let's have a look at Marlene's old rowing photos. Marlene, talk us through. What are we looking at here?
Okay, this is one of my first races. I think this is probably 1979-ish at the Empire State Games in New York State. I rowed for Westside Rowing Club, and I was rowing with a girl named Karin Fecteau, and we rowed the pair a lot together in high school. And here we were winning the junior pair, and I think we won the senior pair too at the Empire State Games here in this is 1979 or 1980, but this was actually the from the photo that was in the Buffalo Evening News. So,
and you're in the stroke seat, yeah?
Yes, I'm in the stroke seat. Karen's in the bow seat. Now this is rowing at, this is Boston University. I'm in the stroke seat here, looking extremely overcompressed with the red bandana on. And this is, I think we were training, this is actually during the head of the Charles. I think we were coming down the course in the head of the Charles, or we might have been just going to warm up. I don't remember, but this was ahead of the Charles crew. And I think this is like 1983 on the Charles. Oh, this is me in 1985. And I am rowing at the Crashby Sprints in 1985. And note the wheel is, I don't know, you can't really tell too much from this picture, but this was one of the original Concept 2s with the bicycle wheels with the plastic fans and the bicycle sprocket gear. And at that time, we had to row 2,500 meters. And if you broke 10 minutes, that was a really good time at that point in time. So this is the women's lightweight single. I was a senior at Boston University at that time.
Great.
Now fast forward here. This is that last one was 1985. This is 1999. Okay, so fast forward 14 years. This is 1999 at the Canadian Henley in St. Catharines in the senior lightweight double, and I'm 35 years old here.
And did you win?
I think we were second by like 0.2. It was just something awful, I mean, the Canadian Henley, I've been second at Canadian Henley, I think 4 times, and 3 of the times have been like by 0.2 of a second or 1/10 of a second. So I've never gotten a Henley medal, which is infuriating. But it was a very good race. And this is me in my single, and I was in Florida at the Florida Rowing Center. So this picture is about 2008, I think 2009, and I'm just coming in, and I was out coaching in my single.
Oh, that's so good. So cute.
I still have the same boat too. My boat is 21 years old now, I think.
I was going to say, I think my single's probably a very similar age.
Yeah, but it's
2001.
I have that magic boat. I said when my boat is being built, make sure everybody's happy who's working on my boat. So
that's such a good motivator.
Yeah, I still row the same boat. I love it.
That's so good. Thank you so much for sharing those pictures from your past. They're delightful, and I love the look of determination on your face when you That's so.
I know. I haven't raced in a long time, though. I did jump in one race. It was hysterical 2 years ago, with Chinook in at the Sarasota Regatta, and somebody didn't show up, and they're like, "We need you to row. We need somebody to jump in." And I jumped in this quad. It's the first time I have raced since 2001. So it was quite an experience. It was a lot of fun. and everything went wrong in that, and everything went wrong. I mean, the women were fantastic. They were all, but the Shimano shoes came off because when they checked the heel cords, the person who did it kind of pulled the shoe loose. So, I think it was Jeanette Brimble's shoes. Her shoe came undone, and then something happened they weren't used to the toe. I know you're an expert toe, but something happened with the toe. So the toe wouldn't steer right. And I mean, it was hysterical. We had a ball.
I think low expectation races are often the most fun. It's like, hey, well, we're a scratch crew. Let's just go and see what happens.
I know. Well, they were surprised. I mean, I went off. They had me stroking the quad. I went off the start at 42, I think. So they didn't think that was too bad. So it was a lot of fun.
You at stroke.
I know.
And just to wrap up, a final reminder that if you still like our free training program for while you're off the water, the link is on the screen. I'll put it also in the show notes, and it is linked off of our blog at fastermastersrowing.com/blog, and it's called Rowing Resources for COVID-19. Any final words, Marlene?
No, I hope everybody has a good week, and starts making some plans to get a little closer to the water.
Yeah, I'm so looking forward to it as well. Next week, I'm going to show you my blistered hands, because hopefully we'll be on the water on Thursday here in New Zealand.
Can I give people a little tip? Mm-hmm. Yeah, one before we go. Okay, here's an old grandmother's trick. If you haven't been on the water for a while and you don't want to get blisters, start now. Okay, you need maybe for 2 weeks. Each day, pour a little rubbing alcohol in your palm of your hand and just rub your hands. Air dry it, and do that once a day for about 2 weeks, and that conditions your skin and you won't get any blisters.
Well, there's a promise. I like it. On that note, this has been Faster Masters Rowing Radio for Lockdown Rowing Week 8. Thank you to everybody who joined us live. It is lovely to have you there, and we love having your questions. And for everyone who's going to be watching the replay, please enjoy. Put questions down, because we will try and incorporate them into next week's show. And till next time, goodbye.